it's Quana, back again with another review. Today I am going to be reviewing the new film Antebellum, which is available streaming through Apple TV and also through Prime and through most of your pay for streaming services. It is about $20 in cost, so about the cost of 2 adult movie tickets. Talk about it. So this film is starring Janelle Monae, my favorite musical artist, and I proudly consider myself a fam droid. But this film has been getting a lot of negative reviews, so I definitely wanted to take the time to sit down and watch this. So I watched this the other night with my husband, and I have some thoughts about why it's receiving the negative press that it is receiving, and hopefully some suggestions for directors who might be interested in using the same type of film techniques that this film employs and how they could perhaps do it a little bit differently. So I'm going to start with my non-spoiler review and just my summarization of what the film is. And if you've seen the trailer, this summary won't be anything new for you. Starring Janelle Monae, she plays an author and a race relations expert. And the film is set very parallel to our current time in history. And her name is Veronica Henley. She is traveling the world on book tours, traveling the United States on book tours, and she is a mother and she is a wife. That is one portion of the film. In the other portion of the film, she also plays a character named Eden, who is a slave on a plantation. And that is about all that we know about the film from the trailer. We don't really know, but the trailer evokes this idea that perhaps Veronica is some type of time traveler, or somehow or another she has been plucked to travel through time. When I first saw the trailer, the very first trailer, I thought that this was going to be a play on Octavia Butler's Kindred. Which is also about a female protagonist who goes back into slave times. I kind of thought that the way that this film was portrayed from the first 2 trailers that dropped, that perhaps the character that she plays has been summoned along with several other Black women, and that they're traveling back to the actual time period of slavery during the Civil War era, or the Antebellum era, and that they're going to be somehow assisting Union soldiers with defeating Confederate troops. That is the aura that I got from the original trailer. I did not know whether this film was going to be a horror film, or whether it was going to be a science fiction film, or whether it was going to be some play on a spiritualistic sci-fi kind of film. And I think that is what they wanted to evoke. They wanted us to have questions about what this film was doing when the trailers were created. And so I think because there was one trailer that had a very much of a horror vibe to it, like she was being taken and snatched and then thrown into the past. The other one had much more of a kind of like time traveling feel to it. And I think that is when you have this world that you're going to be delving in, especially in this current climate, and you have shows like Watchmen, you have shows like Lovecraft Country, it needs to be very clear what the film is going to do. And so I think a lot of film goers and early reviewers went into the film thinking that it was going to be one of those 2 things, and thinking that the film was not going to be serving up the kind of slavery imagery that actually exists in the film. This film has a shockingly low score on Rotten Tomatoes. I believe as of September 20th, it is at 29%. But the audience review of that is much higher. It's around 67%. And I think that movie reviewers, especially credible critics, are being extremely harsh on this film because there is this corrective lens climate that we are in, where it feels like any imagery that shows the abuse of Black and brown bodies is on camera, then it's got to have almost a negative score. It's very okay, I will go ahead and say this. I'm very baffled at how low the scores are and how low the reviews have been for this film, simply because there are so many shows out there that are doing very similar things. You have hashtag Free Rayshawn, which just picked up a bunch of Emmy nominations and an Emmy win. I know that I don't know everyone who won in that, but I definitely know that Jasmine Cephas Jones, who I adore, won her category for that show. There are all kinds of shows. There's Lovecraft Country, which is set in like the civil rights era or pre-civil rights era. So there's all kinds of shows that are showing imagery that are about violence toward Black people in America due to this white supremacist system. And so I don't know why some people had a problem with this film. I really do think it has to do with the initial way that the trailers were framed and the fact that the trailers don't necessarily live up to what the expectation of audiences might be going into the film. So I will say that is my non-spoiler. So my non-spoiler summary of this is the film definitely is not as low as 29%. The film is enjoyable. Is it 100% the best film I've ever seen ever? No, there are certainly several problems into the film that I will get into it in the next portion, but it does have its problems, but it is an enjoyable film on a first time view. It is not a film that I would sit down and watch over and over and over again. There is not a single slavery based movie that I ever have sat down and watched more than once, with the exception of, I think, Roots. And I have tended to watch Roots more for the back half of Roots and the family saga of Roots, more so than for I tend to pass by those episodes that focus on Kunta Kinte's indoctrination into slavery. So there's not a slave-based film that I have watched more than once. And the closest thing to suffering of Black people that I have probably watched more than once is The Color Purple. Most films that involve Black suffering, I do not watch more than once. I think that they are thought-provoking and necessary for that purpose, but they're not necessarily enjoyable films that I'm going to watch over and over again. So that being said, I think it is a much better film, and I think that it is worth a look if you are interested in what this particular film has to say, because I definitely think it has a message that it is trying to convey. Now, for my spoiler review and my breakdown and my analysis, so if you have not seen the film and you want to see it without knowing anything more than that, I promise you, please come back, but stop it right now, come back later, and join me again for the rest of this after you've seen it to see what my take is, okay? So, spoilers are starting now. So the film actually gives away several clues to its ending very early on. I guessed the ending within the first 10 minutes of the film, because in the first few minutes of the film, you see there is a woman, Janelle Monae's character. She's being carried on horseback, back as though she's been captured, and she is being brought back to the plantation that she has fled from. And we see that there are 3 slaves. There is a male slave, and then there is a darker skinned female slave who have also been trying to flee and run away. The female slave with the dark short hair, I don't know her name, but she attempts to run away. And as soon as she's running, and you see the close up for what is about to happen, that she's going to get gunned down, you see that she has a nose ring in her nose and that she is wearing a gold chained cross. Obviously, that was a big old red flag for me. And I was like, wait a second, there's no way that this slave would be having a gold cross on. So this is a clue that there's something not right here, that this is something. I immediately thought, okay, this is where we get to play on the time travel piece, because she has something that is from her being from a modern age. So I guessed that right away. So Eden's character is taken back to the main slave owner, or I can't even remember his name in the film. I'm not going to be good with anybody's name in this film, so I apologize. And she's brought back, and she is then branded. Okay, she is branded. We know that branding did happen. It is one of the only violent scenes that we see on camera, because almost every other violence towards the slaves is done with a lot of nuance to the fact that you don't actually see it on the screen. So you see the Black woman get gunned down, but you don't see it up close. You see, and you know that the Black male slave is going to be beaten, but you don't really see it. And Eden, we do see her being raped. It is rape, okay, because obviously she does not want it, but we don't see the violence of it in that sense, because at the time that we see her being raped by this white character, she's becoming used to it. We do, however, see her get branded. And I think that is something to say about Janelle Monae's character, as who she is as a real human being, because I don't think that we're ever going to see, first of all, anything that's going to show her in nudity, her in any kind of like super uber degraded state. We're not going to see that, because that's not who she is as a woman. So I think that was probably handled with a lot more nuance than maybe even the directors had planned it. But I wanted to address the point that I just made there. Yes, I am aware that even as a musical artist, Janelle Monae has performed in various states of dress or undress. But I think it is highly different when she is dressing in a certain way to own her own sexuality and her own image than the way that she might be in a movie. And it's not to say that she would never be in a movie where she would be showing more skin or showing more sexuality, but I think that she tries to distance her expression for how she is in movies to how she is in music. That's just something that I have noticed about her. She can completely prove me wrong when I say this, but I just wanted to make up that point that yes, I am aware, because I have seen lots of pictures of her looking very foxy with a lot less clothing on, but we just haven't seen that side of her on screen. All right, continue. Originally. We find out that the slaves are not able to talk, and we see her trying to figure out a way to mask her steps to the front of her cabin, exiting her cabin without making any noise at all. We see her slathering the door joints with grease so that they don't creak when she opens the door. We see the black man come back to her, knocking at her door, finding out when they're going to try again, asking her. She keeps kind of shutting the door in his face or indicating like, no, not right now. And she hasn't mastered being able to get out of the bed without making a sound yet. So we see her rehearsing that. The next thing that I think we see is we see some more slaves arriving to the plantation. And one of the young women is, oh my gosh, I can't think of her name, but she was in Kearney. Oh my gosh, this one's from me. Kirstie Clemens. She was in the new live action version of Lady and the Tramp. Beautiful young woman. And so she comes and she says, I recognize you. And she tries to tell Eden's character, I recognize you. When are we going to escape? When are we going to get out? And she's trying to warn her, like, don't say anything. You have to be quiet. And none of the slaves are allowed to talk at all. They have to be in silence. The only time that they are allowed to talk is when they're supposed to be singing like spirituals. And, it's almost like they don't really know what to do. That they're not used to it. They don't know what to sing. We kind of find out that they whistle, and the whistling that they do is kind of coded messages that they're sending to each other. And that is, of course, what Negro spirituals were. They were coded messages. But you can tell that they don't seem like they're very familiar with them. Okay, so we find out eventually that Kirstie Clemens' character is pregnant. The next time we see them, they are being tasked to serve at this big banquet that the Confederate soldiers are having. And there is this one female character played by Janelle Monae. I think her name is Elizabeth, but I'm not sure if that was her name. Or it might be her name at a certain point in the movie. But like, you definitely see her and this other woman there. But the black women are referred to as Sapphires, and they are going to do whatever the men want to do. And of course, the illusion there, the inference there, is that you can have sex with them. That is part of the voiceover that I thought from the trailer was going to be that these women were going to be like undercover soldiers, because the way that they played that was with a close-up of the women, and it made it seem like they were somehow going to be like soldiers in the war when I saw it from the trailer. So tell me down below in the comments how you interpreted that line when you saw the trailer, but that's how I interpreted it. But we find out that, and of course, I did know that Sapphire was a term that had been used to almost like black women as Jezebel kind of figures. Anyhow, there's this young soldier there named Daniel. He seems very skittish. He seems like he's not used to this. And he ends up going and being with or supposed to have sex with Kiersey Clemons' character, and and I can't remember what her name ended up being, but they named her. They went through the process of naming her when she got to the plantation. She tries to win him over. She tries to get him interested. But to say, like, I know you're not like all the others. You seem like you're different. You seem like you're nicer. Well, in fact, he takes offense to this because he feels as though by her saying that, it implies that he is weaker. And so he ends up actually hitting her and, like, basically telling her, you better make it seem like we had sex together. She ends up, because she's beaten, and then eventually she is chastised during the while they're in the fields, and the one of the kind of overseer guys ends up like kicking her, and of course I don't know if they know that she's pregnant, but she ends up having a miscarriage right there. Eden is tasked to take her back to her quarters and get cleaned up. Well, the next day or the next jump in time that we see her again, she has committed suicide from having lost her baby. That was probably, to me, the most tragic moment in the entire movie, because that, as a mom, that knowledge of that was like very devastating. But again, most of the violence happens off camera. And it's certainly a lot less violent than most slave movies. Let me just say it is way less violent than Amistad, than 12 Years a Slave, than any of those movies, in my opinion. In my opinion, it's less violent because they allude to more things and they don't really show as much damage in those sequences. And I believe right around that time, Eden goes to sleep. And then you hear an alarm, which is the clue to me that I was right, because the alarm sounds like it's happening right then and there. And I'm like, oh, somebody's phone. This is all happening in real time, like 2020, 2021, something like that. Well, she wakes up and she's in a different bed and she's with her husband and her daughter is there. And it is the modern era. And we get to meet her as Veronica. And so she goes on this book tour. She has this very strange interview with Jenna Malone's character, and she's riding in a car and she's talking to her as though she knows her. And it's very clear that this is not something that was set up by like her agent. And she basically is like almost like stalkerish. Anyhow, she goes to this hotel where she's going to be doing this book tour, and she's going to be doing this conference, and she is doing yoga, which all I kept thinking was her song, Let Your Body Do That Yoga, which is horrible to be thinking about in a movie like this, but that's literally what my mind went to. And I was like, if they had played that at that moment, I think that would have like cut the ice, probably the temperature, and it probably wouldn't have fit. But I just kept thinking if they had put Let Your Body Do That Yoga, party at the beach down at Copacabana. Sorry, okay. Anyhow, her friend Gabi Sidibe's character comes over and they're gonna meet up and they're gonna go out and have dinner, and they're attending a conference and we get to see her at the conference. Now, this is where I think some things could have happened a little bit differently, because I think they were trying to make her almost like a Melissa Harris Perry, like a very much of a liberal kind of personality. And I kind of think maybe they should have leaned on making her more of a Candace Owens type of personality, because then this happening to her would have had a little bit more weight to it. But that is not the route that they went, because they probably did not want to get sued. And that would have been just too much on the nose. And it probably would have been like a sense of like, she deserved it. And I think that that was the thing they wanted to stay away from. They did not want to make this character in any way, because no one would ever be deserving like that, like no way, shape, or form. But I think they want to stay away from giving us any kind of background where anybody can say that she was deserving of what happens to her, because no one ever is. Well, anyhow, they go out, they're having a good time. Gabi Sidibe lights up the screen in this movie. She is definitely has the best lines of the film. Janelle although she is literally one of my like favorite artists of all time, um, she does have a persona that she presents to the public of being extremely knowledgeable, extremely well spoken. And unless you look at more nuance behind the scenes stuff, or stuff where she's just with her friends, or where she's just vibing, or you've been like me and been blessed enough to go to one of her concerts, you don't always get to see the fun loving having side of her. You see the super like activist side of her. And I think because that's the side that we see in this film, and that's the voice that she takes with this film, and that's the way that the acting of this film is done, it comes across as very stiff. And so while she was good in the scenes where she was silent and where it was just the close-ups of her face and she was working with her face, where she has to speak, it didn't feel natural at times. The lines between her and Gabi, they only felt comfortable once you could tell she had to play off of Gabi a bit more. You could tell that the chemistry between her and the other friend, it wasn't as comfortable as the friendship between her and Gabi. So it just felt kind of stiff at times. Gabi lights up the screen as this friend who is just like very like fun loving, and she's going to try to get a boo. She plays Bridget. Bridget is the character's name. And she just was a adorable character. Well, they're going to go out and party, and Veronica, because she is married, is going to go back to her hotel, and so they get Ubers. And at no point do we see any of these women check and verify that they are getting in the right vehicle. So Veronica just gets into this vehicle, and they take off, and then she is taken. And my husband literally said, they need to get Liam Neeson on the phone. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so she's taken and she's kidnapped, and the person driving is Elizabeth, who is also the same woman at the plantation and the same woman from the interview that was like stalkery. And so that's how she ends up at the plantation. So we're literally seeing that all this is happening in real time. So she is kidnapped, she goes missing, they take her to this plantation, and it's happening in 2020. It's happening now, 21st century slavery. And so, there is an argument to be had that slavery hasn't ended, it's just shifted to sexual slavery. But this is real slavery as we would think of it, like chattel slavery, being reinstated and being hidden in plain sight. And so it's at a working plantation / Civil War reenactment facility, and it is happening in real time. And so we end up back with Veronica in the bed where she has just been raped by the Senator General dude. And he goes out to his horse, and he has his phone, and he pulls his phone out. And so that's how we know that he is a senator, and that this is all happening. And they're finding it. We hear that her husband has been doing all these press looking for her because she's gone missing. And him and the daughter have been out on TV, nationwide TV, looking for her. And so they're trying to make sure that they don't get any attention from any of this. I don't remember if the opening sequence, because in the opening sequence of her waking up as Veronica Henley, she is watching herself on the news, kind of debating this guy. And I thought it was a much older gentleman than the one who actually ended up taking her. But I have to look at that again. And so anyway, we find out that this is all happening in modern age. And so they basically are plotting to escape, which they begin to do. So the next time that they're in bed together, she manages to sneak. She's like, okay, we're going to do this. The woman has killed herself, and so they're going to escape. So she manages to get out of the cabin, and they find the phone. They get to the phone, and I don't remember. Okay, this is where it gets a little foggy for me, because there's a fight sequence between the general and and Veronica, and oh my gosh, what is this? What is that man's name? This is going to drive me crazy, because he's just him. He's just him. Eli's character, who is the other slave that's with her. They kind of escape. They go run through the field. They run across the two young men who have been recruited. They're like young guys, and they've been recruited, and they don't know anything. And one of them is vaping, and they're able to take him down so they can get back. They have to go back, and somehow try to use the phone because the signal is not able to be used out in the field. So they go closer to the cabin to try to call 911, and they lose the 911 connection. So they have to go back in, sneak back in somehow, and use his face. Well, that is when like the fight ensues, and they end up he ends up getting the upper hand and killing Eli, but Veronica is able to overpower him and take him down. And eventually, they have this shed where they have been like burning the bodies of the dead, of the slaves that they kill. And she's able to get him and two of the other guys in there and set it on fire. And that's like the scene where you see her from the trailer with the torch. Long story short, eventually ends up with a chase between Elizabeth, Jen Malone's character, and Eden, or Veronica, played by Janelle Monae, and she tries to hunt her down. They fight. They overpower each other. You definitely are kind of seeing the side of white supremacy, in which white women can be not only complicit but also take a hands-on role in it. And so she's able to eventually like tie a noose or lasso around Jenna Malone's character and drag her while she's riding on the horse, because there was an allusion to her riding on horseback. There's a photo of her on her mantle that I noticed when they showed her with her husband and her daughter. And they go to the base of Robert E. Lee's statue, where Jenna Malone's skull gets basically cracked, and she's able to run off. And that is the scene where you see from the trailer where she's running on the horseback and she's in the midst of the fighting, and it is a Civil War reenactment. It is not real. And she's able to eventually get out, and they're able to blow the whistle on the place and take it down. There's a lot of argument about what the film is saying, and I think the message is clear, and it's a different message than what I think a lot of other films are making, right? Because the message is about these monuments that exist. The fact that in this country we have allowed not only these monuments to exist, but the Civil War reenactments, people allowing to relive the glory days of the South. What were the glory days of the South? What does it mean to make America great again? All of that means a return to a time period where there were slaves, where the growth of this country was literally built on the backs and the blood of people who were not disenfranchised. Like, we use that word and we don't know it. People use that word so lightly, disenfranchised. Not disenfranchised. They were treated as animals, brutalized, broken, stripped down, families torn apart, bodies broken and beaten and slaughtered. All of that. That is what allowed this country to flourish. This was these, humans treating other humans as animals. That is what allowed this country to flourish. And when it ended, it's not as though the thoughts behind that ended. It's not like that all just went away. It didn't just all go away and evaporate. Nothing like that ever can go away and evaporate. And it certainly can't go away and evaporate when we allow people to still relish in that time period. When you are allowed to still have statues and monuments and buildings to the people who were fighting to maintain that, to maintain slavery, when you have literally Civil War reenactments. Like, what is the purpose behind that? Because it's not necessarily that people just want to reenact and be like, we're the Union, we're going to take down the Confederates. There are people who want to be on that side, who want to reenact that. Why? What is the glory that you get out of that? I mean, you can play capture the flag without it being a reenactment. And even I think we could look deeper and wonder, is there a criticism even on films, even on art that does this? Is it time to bury and to dismantle the systems that allow us to continue to allow people to continue to take pleasure and joy out of this time period? The last scenes where you see the demolishment of the plantation as a whole, not just the statue, but the plantation, it's a cry for people to start tearing down these systems that allow people to relish in a time period that was built on the bodies of other people. So I think it's a very different message than what you see in other films that don't necessarily have a clear message. I mean, when you look at 12 Years a Slave, as great of a film as that was, it was it was a narrative that was written to try and sway people to be abolitionists. And so now we're watching the film adaptation of this narrative to what just really see the horrors of slavery, right? That's all that it really shows us. There is no bigger message really beyond slavery was a horrible time. This, however, has a bigger message, I think, because it's like not just slavery was bad. Slavery was bad. Don't forget slavery was bad. But now it's slavery was bad. Don't forget slavery was bad. And if we're not careful, we could end up back in those same periods. We could end up back doing the same things because we're not allowing that part of the past to die. Because as the quote from, I believe it was Faulkner at the beginning of the movie said, the past is never really dead. The past isn't even past. We can't get past the past. So how can we move on into the future? And I think that's the message to me that I gleaned from the film. What could have made it better? So I definitely think, first of all, Rotten Tomatoes is wrong. It's not 29%. I think it is much closer to the 60s if you're going to give it a percentage. I would even say, because I'm a teacher and I'm thinking of, these percentages as a grading scale, I definitely would not give this a D. I wouldn't even give it, a C. I would say a high C to a low B. It needs to be somewhere in like the 70s. It wasn't horrible. Shots were breathtaking. Cinematography was great. The use of silence, the use of some of these technologies and these strategies that have been used in more recent times with horror and science fiction, like the use of silence in the film, really, really super smart how they did that, right? The idea that the slaves would have to be silent so that no one else could hear them. So they're able to do this in plain sight. That is ingenious, right? The little nuances where you can hear the plane flying overhead and you hear the sound, but you really don't know what that means. And so until you see the twist, that wasn't rather, if you were still confused past the first 10 minutes, that was just you weren't paying attention. I'm sorry. As soon as you saw the gold chain, you should have knew, oh girl, there's no way a slave would have a gold chain around her neck. She had to, and the piercing, like, literally, it was right there. It was so in plain sight. So it wasn't even really a twist. I also think the twist could have even existed had they not bisected the plot. If they had given us the Veronica Henley plot at the beginning and then flipped back, I think that still could have been, like, if we would have seen her being carried on horseback and the idea of like seeing the ancestors be in the past or whatever, I think it could have still worked. They didn't have to put it in that way, but it worked. I think the biggest thing is choices that were made in the exposition of who these characters were and the building of these characters that did not help convey that tale more. Like I said, I understand the choice of not making her kind of a Candace Owens type character, but I think that because I think you run a lot of risk of people complaining about that, but I think that the idea of like Veronica knew this existed. She, in the sense of she knew and she was awake to white supremacy. I think taking a character who is ignorant to that, is ignorant to the fact that it still is in existence, is a much more stronger story, because now you have a character, kind of almost like out of The Handmaid's Tale. You have a character who's thrust into this world. And thinking about the character in Handmaid's Tale, and oh my gosh, y'all, don't slap me. Serena, thank you. Serena, who helps, spoiler alert, who helps bring this world to pass, and then it ends up biting her in the butt, right? I think that would have been much more interesting in terms of characters, especially if give her a black husband, give her a black baby, like let her have a black existence, but still be like very naive to white supremacy. And now she's thrust in it and it catches her completely off guard. She never would have thought that they would treat her this way. Like that is the much more interesting tale. I think it's very, understandable of why we don't get more of the characters because they are in silence. But I think the fact that we don't get anything out of the white characters, especially Elizabeth, like we get one little word sentence from her towards the end where she says, "I told Daddy not to pick you. You're the first one I did not have a hand in picking," or something like that. Um, and like I wanted to know more about her. Like, how did this become an acceptable thing? Um, there's an article that Jenna Malone did that she kind of like took inspiration from like Ivanka Trump. Um, yeah, I get that, but I want to see her as a complicit, non-overt racist. Let's see her kind of dabbling in wanting to like toe the line of seeming like she is new age and modern and accepting of people, and then we find out that she's living this existence. I think that's much more interesting. Heck, you could have had Veronica be interviewing or on that panel with her. Like that could have been the thing. Like have have Elizabeth and Veronica be debating each other on that panel, and then have the one-on-one sit down after the fact of like, hey, I just want to let you know, this is what this is, and make it seem like she's not this person, but we find out that she is this person. Like that would have been a way much more interesting. Like I said, I think the main thing is people just were really upset that the movie wasn't really a horror film. That it did seem like maybe they were toying with the idea of like not even just time travel, but these characters actually being the same characters as back in the day as they were, and like a reenacting of these racisms that exist, but in the same way, or not in the same way, but in a lesser way. Like the worst thing that we really see is the way that the concierge lady treats Veronica at the hotel. We don't really get to see more of the nuances of the microaggressions of modern day racism. And so I think had we seen more of that in her day-to-day life, then it would have made the twist that much more palpable of like, this is how we get here. But I think they're trusting, here's the thing, I think they're trusting audiences to understand our current state of affairs, to understand where we are in the world, to understand the things that they're seeing on TV, and to understand that history is already here and it's already real, and they don't have to spell it out for audiences because And if you don't know, you're just being blind to it. I definitely personally would give this film a high C to a low B on my teachery scale. And I definitely think it is a film worth watching. I think kudos to Janelle Monae and also Kiersey Clemens. I think she did a great job in this as well. And Gabi Sidibe, it was so good to see her in a film. And she was just so full of life and enjoyable. And I can't wait to see her in something again. I want to see her in like a modern, like in a younger girls trip, like a younger version of that or something like that. Because she's amazing. And Jenna Malone is Jenna Malone, okay? Like, I love Jenna Malone Pride and Prejudice, Jenna Malone Hunger Games. This Jenna Malone, she was okay. I think it was more of the writing of the character, not the acting. So yeah, that's what I think about this film. I don't think that it's nearly as bad. I think in this case, the critics and Rotten Tomatoes have got it wrong, and I think that you should check out Antebellum. Available right now on streaming. All right, guys, so hopefully you have stuck with me for this whole 38-minute breakdown and everything about Antebellum explained. Let me know down below in the comments if you have questions, if you have thoughts, if you have a differing opinion. And I will see you guys soon for Lovecraft Country episode 6. Until next time, toodles.